I had another session, another idea that I was thinking of today. I was listening to a podcast of someone who looked at the history of our current president and looked at his business deals, looked at how he communicated with his people, looked at how he gained his wealth. And this was a person who didn't have really anything against him, but he said, look at his history. Now, this is not going to be a bashing Trump type of thing, but I do want you to understand, for those who support him and who agree with what he's doing, that you must understand who he is. And especially if you are dealing with, you're feeling that he is a leader sent by God to guide over this country. Let's explore that, actually. Let's explore that. Now, we understand that the Lord will sometimes send, at least he did in the Old Testament, he would send a person, send forces to execute what he's supposed to do. In terms of Nebuchadnezzar, he was sent by God to destroy Judah and Jerusalem. And so God will sometimes use those who are not, again, following his law to execute his judgment. Now, after 70 years or so had passed, now the Medes and the Persians had taken over. And he used the king of Persia, God used the king of Persia to begin the process of the Jews returning to their homeland. Again, a person is not really one that follows the laws of Yahweh, but the Lord sent him. He even said, Cyrus, my servant. Because essentially to God, all servants, he can use whoever he will. Doesn't mean that Cyrus was a devout worshiper of Yahweh, but it means that he did what Yahweh had wanted him to do. Then you have Herod the Great, who was a very paranoid and obnoxious man. He even killed at least one of his wives, as well as at least one of his sons, because he was afraid that they were going to take over his throne. But Herod helped in the building of the temple in Jerusalem. This is why it's known as Herod's Temple. Even though he was not one that necessarily followed the law, but he was able to accomplish what the law required, which was the building of a temple. And so these are the examples, and there are plenty more, that people use to say that, well, even though Donald Trump is not a Christian per se, the Lord can use anyone to bring forth this purpose. And so many have staked their beliefs on him that he will do what is said. He will eventually make America a Christian nation. But we have to really look closely at these people, the ones who have been said to do certain things. Let's start with Herod first. Herod did not do this out of the kindness of his heart in terms of building the temple. He wanted favor with the Jews to make his job to subjugate them on behalf of the Romans, who were the real rulers of the land. He wanted to make sure that he can get a good word with them. And he may have even caused a few more problems, because he almost killed. Of course, God wouldn't let him do it, but he ended up slaying all of the males in Bethlehem, because he was, again, afraid that there was one that was born king of the Jews that would take his throne. He was going to kill Jesus, but the wise men found out. And they went, instead of reporting to Herod where Jesus was, they went another way. So while Herod did not find Jesus, in his anger, he killed the boys of Bethlehem, 2 years old and younger. And there was much screaming, much agony, as the mothers wailed that this man could be so cruel. He may have helped build a temple, but he killed their sons. Let's go to the Persian Empire. The Persians, essentially, yes, they let the Jews come in, go back to their homeland. But again, it was an idea of efficacy, expedience, so that the Jews wouldn't rebel against them, because they're being treated very well. They're actually able to rule over their lands as long as they didn't get in the crosshairs of the Persian Empire. Persian, of course, changed to the Greek Empire, who then also held sway over the land. And there finally arose a person named Antiochus Epiphanes, who ended up being the first incarnation of the Antichrist. Whereas he slew a pig in the temple, which of course was unclean. He killed some of the priests that were there, and he promoted himself to God status. Again, you put your hopes in man, and man will many times dash those hopes. I can even say that to avoid the famine in Israel, Jacob and his sons, in some miraculous way, because one of his lost sons, Joseph, enabled his family to avoid starving to death by coming to Egypt. But in certain time, since they grew in numbers so fast, the Egyptians enslaved the Israelites. And it took the power of God through Moses to get them out. Well, what am I saying about all this? There's something very carefully. There are some people who were sent by God, who actually listens to God, hearkens to what he says. And those, you may say, okay, we can see that. There are also those who end up doing the will of God because God is a puppet master. He will bring up who he will, put down who he will. It may not seem like a flattering thing, but essentially it means that God controls everything. But the time that sometimes we think that, oh, this is our champion, God has blessed him, he turns around and does things against the people of God, against humanity. Why? Because the person never thought about you in the first place. He used you to grab power. And after that, he disposed of you to laugh in your face while he gathers all the money and all the influence and all the power. And by the time you realize who he is, it's too late. So we have a president who many people have called will lead us to a Christian heritage. But I've told these past stories as warnings to be careful, to watch, to hope that this person is not a Trojan horse. And if you know the story of the Trojan horse, this is in Greek mythology. Good to learn some things, even though you don't believe in the god Zeus or Artemis or Diana. But there are certain lessons. Story of the Trojan horse. The Greeks were trying to defeat the city of Troy. Troy had stout defenses. And many people died on both sides. Could not conquer Troy. But therefore they thought of an idea. Let's make this big horse, hollow horse, and offer to them as a peace. Because we're too tired of fighting. But they put some of their soldiers in the horse. Had enough room in there to field a pretty good sized force. So the other Greeks but they drew back. So all the people of Troy saw was the horse. Must be a present from the gods. Drew the horse into the city. And when nightfall came, and they were finished celebrating, everybody fell asleep, the Jews opened up the horse, went to the gates, opened up the gates for the other, not Jews, Greeks, the other Greeks to come in, and they conquered the city. So my point is, it may seem as a gift, any man. I didn't think that President Obama was an end-all, be-all for salvation. Thought of him as a good politician. Thought of him as a president that good in some things, had flaws in other things. But never hung the role of savior of the country to Barack Obama or Joe Biden. I wouldn't hold that to any man. And what you may think is his good points may be the points that actually end up destroying you. For last thing, at the very beginning, I talked about this person who had researched our president's business deals. And be honest, he wasn't a very good businessman. He declared bankruptcy multiple times. But he was able to, because his lawyers were able to weasel out of any interpersonal bankruptcy. He was able to break up the companies themselves. But a lot of people lost their jobs. And because of financial pressure, he also stiffed many of the subcontractors that worked with him to build things, to fund things, to do other, for be able to bring his projects to life. What made him so famous was great word of mouth, which he received when he became the star of the show, The Apprentice. Because we hear from the producers of that show that, number one, he wasn't the first choice. And number two, they made a lot of things appear to be a certain way, and it wasn't that way at all. For him to be more attractive to the viewer, to be this person who owns all of New York, all of these properties, and doing well with all of them, that in itself made up a lot of money. Not to mention his loans from his father wasn't just $1 million. He ended up using close to $500 million. That was quite a bit. And he's never been poor. He's never had to stand in line to get food stamps or to get assistance. He had his lawyers who worked to make sure that he was clear of everything. In other words, what made him what he is right now is his name. It's his name. So maybe he will be a great president. Maybe he will put the United States in a position that the world admires or is jealous of. But I will say this: be careful of who you vote for, because eventually every person falls back on what they really are, either to one's blessing or to one's detriment. Again, not to fire on Trump, but because he's the president at this time, just understand and watch and do not quickly put him as a savior of America. I wouldn't put that on anyone at this time. Be careful, because you don't want to be found in a position that you end up ruining the day you even thought of them. Be careful. God bless you.